Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 128. Chapter 128. In the middle of the summer, Princess Mary received an unexpected letter from Prince Andrew in Switzerland, in which he gave her strange and surprising news. He informed her of his engagement to Natasha Rostova. The whole letter breathed loving rapture for his betrothed, and tender and confiding affection for his sister. He wrote that he had never loved as he did now, and that only now did he understand and know what life was. He asked his sister to forgive him for not having told her of his resolve when he had last visited Bald Hills, though he had spoken of it to his father. He had not done so for fear Princess Mary should ask her father to give his consent, irritating him, and having to bear the brunt of his displeasure without attaining her object. Besides, he wrote, the matter was not then so definitely settled as it is now. My father then insisted on a delay of 1 year, and now already 6 months, half that period have passed, and my resolution is firmer than ever. If the doctors did not keep me here at the spas, I should be back in Russia. But as it is, I have to postpone my return for 3 months. You know me and my relations with father. I want nothing from him. I have been and always shall be independent. But to go against his will and arouse his anger, now that he may perhaps remain with us for a short time, would destroy half my happiness. I am now writing to him about the same question, and beg you to choose a good moment to hand him the letter, and to let me know how he looks at the whole matter, and whether there is any hope that he may give his consent to reduce the term by 4 months. After long hesitations, doubts, and prayers, Princess Mary gave the letter to her father. The next day the old prince said to her quietly, "Write and tell your brother to wait till I am dead. It won't be long. I shall soon set him free." The princess was about to reply, but her father would not let her speak, and raising his voice more and more, cried, "Mary, Mary, my boy. Good family. Clever people, huh? Rich, yes? The nice stepmother little Nicholas will have. Write and tell him that he may marry tomorrow if he likes. She would be little Nicholas's stepmother, and I'll marry Bourrienne. He mustn't be without a stepmother either. Only one thing, no more women are wanted in my house. Let him marry and live by himself. Perhaps you will go and live with him too?" he added, turning to Princess Mary. "Go in heaven's name. Go out into the frost, the frost, the frost." After this outburst, the prince did not speak any more about the matter, but repressed vexation at his son's poor-spirited behavior that found expression in the treatment of his daughter. To his former pretext for irony, a fresh one was now added, allusions to stepmothers and amiabilities to Mademoiselle Bourrienne. "Why shouldn't I marry her?" he asked his daughter. "She'll make a splendid princess." And latterly, to her surprise and bewilderment, Princess Mary noticed that her father was really associating more and more with the Frenchwoman. She wrote to Prince Andrew about the reception of his letter, but comforted him with hopes of reconciling their father to the idea. Little Nicholas and his education, her brother Andrew and religion, were Princess Mary's joys and consolations. But besides that, since everyone must have personal hopes, Princess Mary, in the profoundest depths of her heart, had a hidden dream and hope that supplied the chief consolation of her life. This comforting dream and hope were given her by God's folk, the half-witted and other pilgrims who visited her without the prince's knowledge. The longer she lived, the more experience and observation she had of life. The greater was her wonder at the short-sightedness of men who seek enjoyment and happiness here on earth, toiling, suffering, struggling, and harming one another, to obtain that impossible, visionary, sinful happiness. Prince Andrew had loved his wife. She died, but that was not enough. He wanted to bind his happiness to another woman. Her father objected to this because he wanted a more distinguished and wealthier match for Andrew. And they all struggled and suffered and tormented one another, and injured their souls, their eternal souls, for the attainment of benefits which endure but for an instant. Not only do we know this ourselves, but Christ, the Son of God, came down to earth and told us that this life is but for a moment and is a probation. Yet we cling to it and think to find happiness in it. How is that no one realizes this? Thought Princess Mary. No one except these despised God's folk who, walling on back, come to me by the back door, afraid of being seen by the prince, not for fear of ill usage by him, but for fear of causing him to sin. To leave family, home, and all the cares of worldly welfare, in order, without clinging to anything, to wander in hempen rags from place to place, under an assumed name, doing no one any harm but praying for all. For those who drive one away as well as for those who protect one. Higher than that, life and truth, there is no life or truth. There was one pilgrim, a quiet, pockmarked little woman of 50 called Theodosia, who for over 30 years had gone about barefoot and worn heavy chains. Princess Mary was particularly fond of her. Once, when in a room with a lamp dimly lit before the icon, Theodosia was talking of her life. The thought that Theodosia alone had found the true path of life suddenly came to Princess Mary, with such a force that she resolved to become a pilgrim herself. When Theodosia had gone to sleep, Princess Mary thought about this for a long time, and at last made up her mind that, strange as it may seem, she must go on a pilgrimage. She disclosed this thought to no one but to her confessor, Father Aknifi, the monk, and he approved of her intention. Under guise of a present for the pilgrims, Princess Mary prepared a pilgrim's complete costume for herself: a coarse smock, bast shoes, a rough coat, and a black kerchief. Often, approaching the chest of drawers containing the secret treasure, Princess Mary paused, uncertain whether the time had not already come to put her project into execution. Often, listening to the pilgrims' tales, she was so stimulated by their simple speech, mechanical to them, but to her so full of deep meaning, that several times she was on the point of abandoning everything and running away from home. In her imagination, she already pictured herself by Theodosia's side, dressed in coarse rags, walking with a staff, a wallet on her back, along the dusty road, directing her wanderings from one saint's shrines to another, free from envy, earthly love, or desire, and reaching at last the place where there is no more sorrow or sighing, but eternal joy and bliss. I shall come to a place and pray there. Before having time to get used to it, or getting to love it, I shall go further. I will go on till my legs fail, and I'll lie down and die somewhere, and shall at last reach that eternal, quiet heaven, where there is neither sorrow nor sighing, thought Princess Mary. But afterwards, when she saw her father, and especially little Coco, Nicholas, her resolve weakened. She wept quietly, and felt that she was a sinner who loved her father and little nephew more than God. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 128. Hope you liked it. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 128. Wax wings are things without feathers. Stephen Dedalus is literature's patron saint of failed idealists. Like his mythological namesake who crafted wax wings to liberate himself from the impossible confines of Crete, Stephen too desires escape, and so, like one does, et ignotas animum dimuit in artis. Escape from what exactly Mr. Dedalus is not quite so sure of. Early on in life, at a Jesuit boarding school, homesick and lonely, he just wants to escape back to his idealized version of home. Back home on holiday, however, he finds that things are really not so harmonious there either. Returning to school then, he escapes into his studies, showing a deep interest in books and learning, with a particular interest in the romantics. Less romantically, or more so, who are we to judge, young Stephen spends some academic prize money he wins at a Dublin prostitute. Good Catholic that he is, Dedalus is immediately struck with extreme guilt and retreats into the bosom of that more holy lady, the Church. However, just on the cusp of joining the priesthood, he spots a young woman wading in the waters of Dollymount Strand and decides that his true ideal is to become a writer and an aesthete. The only problem is that early 20th century Ireland is simply too constricting to accommodate this ideal. So, desiring to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience, and to forge in the smithy of his soul the uncreated conscience of his race, he decides he must escape his homeland. Part of A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man's enduring relevance and popularity is its depiction of a soul embattled by doubt and struggle. There is something universal in Stephen Dedalus' story of inner strife, and the difficulty of striving towards one's ideals. The same conflict is found in today's chapter with Mary Bolkonskaya. She's tasked early on, in a letter from Andrew, with breaking the news of his engagement to their irascible father. Part of Mary's character is her desire to be a good daughter, so she prays deeply about how best to inform her father, who she suspects will not take the news well. He does not take the news well. First, he vents his frustration at her by means of a classic old Prince Bolkonsky outburst. Then he turns up the volume and frequency of his verbal assaults upon her. Things are not looking good for poor Mary. She does, however, have solace in a dream of hers. That dream is to become a pilgrim like the gods' folk. This dream is so dear to her that at one point she purchases pilgrim garb and stores it away for when the time is right to set out on a pilgrimage. Even the most dismissive of atheists can admire Mary's religious conviction here. This is a woman born to extreme wealth and comfort. And instead of traveling the road of, say, Helene, she settles upon the humble life. She endures her father's insults and remains a dutiful daughter. She supports her family and friends unconditionally. Today we learn that her most precious desire is to give up her life of comfort and live with the poor and downtrodden, dressed only in coarse rags and with little food, in an effort to be closer to God. But, like Stephen Dedalus, she finds it extremely difficult to escape. Her family's siren call is too strong for her to resist. In one of the more brutally sad lines of the novel, Tolstoy writes of Mary, quote, "She wept quietly and felt that she was a sinner. She loved her father and little nephew more than God." End quote. Mary and Stephen's failures are our failures. We all have goals we'd like to achieve and probably more failures than achievements to show for it. The question is how best to respond to failure. There are probably many answers to that question. One of them, however, has to be to interrogate and understand the failure itself. Daily meditation. A consciousness of wrongdoing is the first step to salvation. This remark of Epicurus is to me a very good one, for a person who is not aware that he is doing anything wrong has no desire to be put right. You have to catch yourself doing it before you can reform. Some people boast about their failings. Can you imagine someone who counts his faults as merits ever giving thoughts to their cure? So, to the best of your ability, demonstrate your own guilt. Conduct enquiries of your own into all the evidence against yourself. Play the first part of prosecutor, then of judge, and finally of pleader in mitigation. Be harsh with yourself at times. Seneca, Letters from a Stoic. All right, so that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 128. I hope you liked it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation to PayPal. The links to all that are below. Your support is greatly appreciated. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 129. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.